What's up? I'm Quincy Dawson, and welcome back to The Greatest Teacher of All Time, where I interview teachers of color tied their philosophies, strategies, and personalities. Today, I've got Elle. What's up, Ms. Wong?
What's up?
Yeah,
Having
thank you.
me.
Yeah. Thank you again so much for being here. Really appreciate it. So you teach at an independent school in California right now, and you've actually done a lot of diversity work that I want to talk about. So maybe before we fully get into it, can you tell me like what are all the diversity things that you've been doing or still doing? Tell me from the start to now.
Oh man. That's quite a long list.
Yeah, I know,
Well,
right?
I guess from the start, it was a lot of volunteer work and a lot of just getting together with like-minded people on campus to see what was missing. Look for really like the things on campus where it's like, oh, this policy doesn't make sense, or the way that we do, I don't know, comment writing doesn't make sense. And so, like, talking about those and sort of parsing them out into different buckets so that people could work on them. And so that was kind of the beginning of my work in diversity work. And from there it's sort of branched out into a more official position in which I'm actually like getting to work with other folks in like other schools who do diversity work, and also who like talk about just the higher level things, like definitely more policy creation and sort of the thinking intentionally about the way that we do things.
Yeah, and that's really cool. And it's funny you said it started out as like volunteer work, right? Because you wanted like things to change. But it's so easy. You're a math teacher also. It's so easy to just teach your math classes and go home, right? So like what makes you want to get these changes out?
So, I'm the product of an independent school. I grew up in Oakland, California, and I went to a school in which I wasn't the only, but I definitely had a different experience than my white peers. And so that sort of influenced me. And I had a couple of really excellent mentors who sort of brought that work to our school for me as a high schooler. And so when I went to school for obviously architecture, like that's totally what I wanted to do. Um, I found that I lost touch with the work that was being done. And I found that I didn't care as much about the work that was being done in my program because it didn't involve thinking about the deeper problems of our community and our society. And so when I got out of that program and I realized I wanted to teach math, I also knew that in conjunction with that was the idea that I wanted to get involved in equity and inclusion work and make sure that that was an intentional part of my practice. So being just a math teacher was never it. It was definitely being a math teacher plus working in equity and inclusion, working in justice.
That's interesting. So even with the architecture, you tried to, I guess, have a focus in like architecture that's like accessible for diverse groups, or what does that entail?
No, that was sort of like my empty period where I didn't have enough time to really be engaged in equity and inclusion work because I was so busy in the studio. Luckily, I had friends who were part of the posse program, and so they sort of brought me in, and they were like, "Hey, we're having these conversations. We know that you would really enjoy having these conversations and doing these things with us." And so I got brought into the Tulane posse fold with like some people there who rekindled that for me, and they reminded me of like, oh yeah, like I do want to do something more meaningful than just think about structure and think about buildings.
Wow, okay. Yeah, and it's cool that someone like lit that spark in you to like get back to it, right? And yeah, one thing I've noticed about my different schools I've been at public, private, charter, and all that. But being at an independent school, you of course you're teaching a class and everything, but like the school we were at or I was at gives you like so much like freedom to like do extra things, right? Is that
Yeah.
kind of like how you were like more pushed into it?
Yeah, for sure. I think, in independent schools, the theme is that we always have many hats. And so one of the hats I had to make sure that I was wearing was just the DEI work hat and being involved in whatever way that sort of looked like. So yeah, I don't know. I just really tried to make sure that that was a part of it, and found a school this summer that was also it was part of their sort of motto, their credo.
Yeah, I like that. And so with now you have this official title, right? Starting from volunteer work to official. What is the official title? Can you reveal?
So my official title is equity and inclusion coordinator. The diversity is left out of it because it's assumed that diversity is something that we are already always intentionally striving for.
Okay, wait. On the website, is there another position that has the word diversity in it? What is that?
Yeah, so well, there used to be. I think
Okay.
we have the director of equity and inclusion who is my boss, and then we have myself who is the equity and inclusion coordinator. And we also now recently this year we established an equity and inclusion advisor
Oh,
to
okay. You guys
oversee
have a
that.
whole little group over there. Okay. Nice.
Yeah,
And
we are
so,
growing.
yeah, that's great. So, what are you in this group doing? Like, what are some of your like initiatives or objectives?
Yeah, so my initiatives are based purely in the coordination aspect of making sure that the students are coordinated with the adults. So my main role right now is working with the student affinity group leaders and making sure that they know what they're doing and sort of training them to be change makers in their own spaces and really guiding them through, what does it mean when someone says something off in their space and how do they deal with it, as well as how do they educate sort of the people in their spaces to be upstanding citizens of like their own like little community and also within the greater Vistamar community.
Okay, okay. I like that. And I don't know, it just gets me thinking that so we've our first year having an diversity and inclusion person was probably like 2018, 19, right? But it seems like a
Yeah,
lot more schools like became more focused or hyper aware of things like that after the George Floyd in 2020.
yeah.
Um, why do you besides that, like why do you think that these diversity and inclusion roles are important?
Besides, you mean like besides like people suddenly realizing that, well, having it brought to the forefront of their attention that this
Yeah, right.
matters.
Yeah, why is it important when it's not in the forefront, like when it's not on the news?
Because I think people always need to think about, who is being taken care of and why a rule is in place. I think one of the things I always think about is like, why do I do this and who does this benefit? Because, when you don't think about that, I feel like it always falls back to the powerful majority, or what is now not really a majority, but like, it kind of falls back to the normal, and the normal isn't fair or equitable. And so I think it's important to constantly think about, what purpose do the things that we do serve? Like, what is the greater purpose behind this? Does it actually serve everybody? Because if we're not thinking about that, then it's too easy to fall back on our laurels.
Yeah, okay, I like that. And I guess what you're doing now, you're doing that, but you also work with other schools doing the same thing. Is that true?
Yeah, my role is a little bit less outward facing, but our department does collaborate with the other, the people in our community, so in the greater LA area, to actually, talk about like, what are you doing at your school? Okay, what does your program look like, and how do we make it better?
Okay. Yeah, I low key think that might be like one of the most important parts of it, right? Because schools are made to serve, of course, your students, but also the community too, right? So if you're not doing that extra community outreach and work like that, your school is really staying within its bubble, you know?
Yeah, and that's for sure something that I feel like I've I've thought about my role as the coordinator and thinking about, how to get to the director place. And I think one of the things about that is figuring out how to make those connections and foster those connections in an authentic way. And that's why I've sort of like stuck in the coordinator role for a bit, just because I really feel like I still have so much to learn. And I luckily have a director who has been fantastic at sort of like making sure that I try different things, and she makes sure that I have the opportunity, should I want it, to try different roles in our office.
Yeah, okay, okay. And I like that you said doing all this in an authentic way, right? Because you can see all these Instagram and posts from people and stuff. They have like their one black head of diversity for the company, like make some statement, they do some campaign, but it just doesn't seem authentic when they're doing it,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you guys, what do you guys do to make it feel authentic? Or is it just naturally there? I guess that's kind of a weird question, huh?
I mean, let me think about that for a sec.
Because, yeah, I mean, thinking about like the diversity of the school you're at, right? Like, does it always feel genuine?
No, I mean, I think that that's the thing that people are well, a lot of people are discussing now is just by having diversity, like a diverse group of people. I shouldn't even just say having diversity. That sounds so weird. That sounds inauthentic.
Nah,
But
you
like
got it.
by
Yeah.
having right, by having a diverse group of people together does not inherently make an equitable or inclusive space where people feel like they can be be themselves. I feel like authenticity comes it can't just be somebody says that they are authentic, right? Like it has to be within your actions. And so I feel like I'm trying to like get back to the question of, what does it mean when we're trying to be authentic? I feel like authenticity has to be an assessment from the outside.
Hmm.
And we can try to, make sure that we are real, that we say the things that, that we are committing to, but it's really the action piece and the feedback piece from other folks that that determine whether or not we are actually authentic.
Okay. And has that feedback been validating? That's probably the wrong word, but has it been the right type of feedback that you need to make sure you're doing the right thing still?
Yeah, I mean, I think it can be hard in equity and inclusion work because, there's a lot of identity wrapped up in it and there's a lot of feelings wrapped up in it. And so when people give feedback, sometimes it can be from a very personal place. And so that can either come out very emotional, which is fine. And we want people to be emotional. And also like sometimes feedback is hard because you sometimes you only hear like the good, like sometimes when you ask somebody like how was that? Like the automatic inclination is for them to go, "Oh no, 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 that was fine. That was fine. Like that was a good thing you did." When like maybe 5 years down the line you look back on it and you think, "Oh, that was I really like stepped in it. That was not the right thing to do."
Yeah, I mean that's how it is, right? It comes back years later where you're really thinking about like, wow, so and so said this to me. I that didn't rub me the right way, and that's affected me for so long, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's really interesting, and that's also got me thinking about your classes, right? So you're a math teacher. Um, it feels like a lot of times math is one of those um like a gatekeeper sometimes for like more advanced jobs and things like that. But also math has like some stereotypes sometimes, right? Or like, oh,
Mhm.
these students are going to be good at math, these students are not going to be good at math, right? How
Mhm.
do you fight or tackle or approach that in your math classes?
I think it doesn't happen alone. I think it takes accomplices who will help. Like if I'm thinking about it in like a personal lens, right? Within my own math class, it takes a lot of me talking to other folks and thinking about uh whether or not something was the right thing to do. And checking in with the people who I can trust who can say, that wasn't and here's how I would have done it differently, or have them holding space for me to think about like or be a partner in how do we make this better. And then on the like grander scale of things, right? When I think about we have such a small department actually at our school because it is an independent school. Like our department is 7 people big. And everybody is involved in different things. And so when we have those conversations as department, we have the opportunity as such a small group to make the changes on the fly and make the changes that we feel are appropriate and right for the students. And so when I say changes, I do mean like definitely the policy aspect of it, but also like what are we doing in the classroom that makes things fair for our students? Because like you said, like math is totally a gatekeepy kind of place where like if you want to get into engineering or you want to get into the medical field, you have to have those things. And one of the big conversations that's happening in the math world right now is talking about tracking and
Hmm.
sort of
Okay.
how tracking obviously hinders people and like it holds people back. And so when we think about equity like and policy change, like what changes can we make behind like either detracking or like making the track not a track, like making it more fluid so that more students have access to the higher level classes should they want it.
Okay, yeah. I like that a lot actually. Yeah, because I feel like, at least from my experience growing up, um, the Asian stereotype, they're good at math, right? Black students aren't. And that even goes to like boys and girls, right? Girls being good at math or boys not being good at it, right? So even with things like that, how are you approaching those types of stereotypes?
So this is going to sound super nerdy, but it's definitely data. You can't really like it's hard to look at the data and see like, oh, are like the people that I've recommended for honors, for example, are all like the louder white like boys or the louder students in my class, and they aren't typically like the black students. Like if you look at that data and you don't see that, or you don't have somebody maybe who points it out to you, then I think it's harder to reflect. But I think data is where that sort of comes to play, right? Because you need the numbers in order to know what is like you don't know what you don't know. So I'm trying to say this in a like a let me try that again. So I think
No, you got it. You got it.
when you look at the data, right, and you see like maybe you've recommended one black student to be in honors the next year out of six, five, whatever your number is. It's small for our school, unfortunately. Like we're still working on that. And you think about like who the picture of an honor student is, I think both of those really go into how you go about creating equity in a math space, in a STEM space. Because if you think about what are my biases behind like who I think is an honor student, I think it's revealed by the data if your numbers don't track with what you like, what you say outwardly. Does that make sense?
Mhm. Yeah, I think I'm getting at it. Yeah. But I guess part of it is I would think the equity part is recognizing that a honors math student looks different sometimes, right? Like a black boy honors math student does not look the same as a white girl honors math student, right? Is that true?
Yeah, I would agree with that assessment. I think that like having a one size fit all is definitely the way like backwards from equity. That's the backward
Yeah.
step. And so it's definitely like that piece of like you're thinking about when you think about who is an honor student, like that's a kind of antiquated term because like you have to think about all the other aspects of like are they maybe an introvert? Like, are they an extrovert? Like, introverts can still do a great job in a classroom, and I feel like we're definitely biased towards extroverts because we
Yeah.
want to talk.
I hear it. I hear it. Yeah. Man, it's just so interesting how all these thoughts have to go into it, right? But
Yeah.
you're doing the work. I appreciate that. You're doing it. Yeah. And so again, we're just talking about your classroom, what you do in the math. Do you have any advice to other teachers and maybe other subjects, other math classes who are maybe just trying to incorporate more diversity inclusion in their classes?
Yeah. I mean, I think you have to be that annoying person who always questions, or you have to have like a team of people who always questions and be a part of that team because I know that sometimes it's hard to be the one person who says, well, why are we doing this? Why are we doing this? Because then you become that really annoying person in meetings who makes the meeting go on like 30 minutes longer than it should. But I think it's important to ask, why do I do this? Um, and really spend time to reflect. And I know time is a cherished thing, but it's so important that like even at the end of the day to spend 5 minutes to think about how the day went and sort of the choices that you made within that day at least is a stepping stone to start to think about how to make your classroom more equitable.
Hmm. Okay. Okay. Yeah. And I guess that just goes back to where it's different for everybody.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. And with that, like, I get it's true, but it sucks like there's no playbook, you know?
Oh yeah, no, it does suck. I so wish like that all the PD that I go to, you know, when I talk to other people who are at other schools and they're like, "Oh, this worked for us," and I'm like, "Yeah, but our school is different." and we've got a different like demographic, we've got different staff members, teaching faculty, and it influences how we go about our practice and our policy creation. I think that it's like, it's super frustrating. I wish there were one way to do things, but it's not realistic.
Yeah, and with me, my math and science brain, I wish there was a flow chart where like if this, then that will happen, right? So I applaud
Okay.
you for being a math person, but still being able to have those types of thoughts and conversations. So
Yeah.
on you for that.
The other thing that I would think about too, as like if there are other teachers who are thinking about or looking to be more conscious about equity and inclusion in their classroom, is find the critical friend. You know, I think you can't do this in a silo. If I feel like you're prey to your own biases and your own um the possibility that you could fall back on what you're used to if you don't have that person who is more than an ally, but somebody who is willing to think critically with you about the things that you're doing in your classroom. And it has to be somebody that you trust too, because if it's somebody that like I don't know in the school telling me like, hey, like you should do this in your classroom, I'd be like, why should I listen to you? So
Mm.
it definitely should be somebody who like is critical of you, that you trust, that can give you honest feedback about what you're doing right and wrong.
Yeah, that's real. That's real. Elle, are you the critical friend?
I have been a critical friend, yes. Um, I am lucky to be that person on campus that people complain to a little bit, and
Mm.
like I've recognized that in the recent years, and I feel like in my position too, I can't not talk to folks and build trust, but also build the trust to like be like, oh no, that was a that was a
Mhm.
weird moment, like for like that we just experienced that you did, or that I feel weird about. And it's hard, especially when you've already built trust with that person. Um, because like it's putting yourself out there to be vulnerable, to be like, oh, that was, it's hardest to criticize your friends. It's hardest to criticize people that you trust, that you feel like they trust you.
Yeah, yeah, and it's hard feeling that when you are like that, like it feels like you have a responsibility to do it, but sometimes you just gotta, hey, set those boundaries too. So
Yeah.
it's rough. There's no flow chart.
No, there is no flow chart. It's just continual conversation and no right answers.
Yeah, man, it never stops. But Elle, you are doing the work. Yeah. So again, Elle, Ms. Wan, thank you for sharing all this with me. Your thoughts on diversity, how you've moved up in the role with at your school. All of it is part of the reasons why I think you might be one of the greatest teachers of all time.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Also, with the support of Transcendence Children and Family Services, I want to present to you this $100 prepaid gift card to use on supplies and things for your students in your classroom.
Thank you so much. I really
Yeah.
appreciate that.
Yeah, I got you, Elle. I got you. You deserve it. Also, thank you to everyone else for watching The Greatest Teacher of All Time, where I interview teachers of color to highlight their philosophies, strategies, and personalities.